Hey guys, hope all is well. Just wanted to go over the exercise for this month of January 2017, and it's basically going to just be the basic squat. It's one of the movements that we do almost probably 100 times a day, sitting down, standing up, sitting down in a chair, standing up, bending down to pick something up off the ground. It's probably one of the most basic movements that we do. So we're going to break this down into four simple points of performance to look for when you're doing a squat, whether it's an air squat with no weight or a back squat with a barbell on your shoulders or a barbell on your front shoulders in a front rack position for a front squat or overhead for an overhead squat. They're all the same. Your foot position should be the same. The mechanics should be the same. So we're going to go over four different points here. The first one is going to be foot position. We want those feet to be about shoulder width apart. How they're turned can be a matter of preference. Ideally, feet generally pointed forward, maybe a slight out turn to about 10 degrees or so. From there, you're going to sit your hips back and down. A lot of times people initiate the movement with their knees going forward first. We want your hips to move first and sit back and down like you're sitting down in a low chair. The third point is to keep your chest up. An immature squat, the chest will fall over. You'll kind of taco your torso a little bit and round the back. What we want to see is keeping your chest up as you do this movement. And then the last thing is we want proper depth. So that proper depth should be hip crease getting below the knees. Okay, so a lot of times you hear people saying never squat below parallel. That is a bit of a misnomer because that actually does provide some shearing forces on your knees. What we'd like to do is get your whole leg involved, not just the front of your leg, not just the quads. We want the glutes, your butt, we want your hamstrings to get involved. So now we're going to go over how that's performed and a little drills to help make it a little bit better. All right, guys, so we're going to go over some of the common faults that we see in an air squat or just a regular squat. The first one, probably one of the most dangerous ones, is the knees collapsing in, kind of making somebody look like they're knock-kneed. So I'm going to use a simple fix using a little short resistance band like this. I'm going to put it around my legs to force the collapse a little bit so that I have some resistance so I can push against this resistance and spread out the band to help my body learn how to not let the knees cave in. So just a simple band. You can find these things on Amazon for about 10 bucks for a whole set that goes from light to heavy. They're good for multiple uses, but this is definitely one good use for them. Okay guys, another common problem that we see with the air squat or just a regular squat is the knees coming really far forward. A lot of people walk around with quad domination. The front of the legs take over for everything. So what we want to see is the hips sit back and down so we can get our whole leg involved, hamstrings and glutes, not just the quads. Another problem with the knees going way forward is that they get out over the toes, putting a lot of pressure on that knee joint, the ligaments in the knee joint, and we really don't want that. So we want to sit back, use as much muscle material as we can, not really be hanging on the tendons and the ligaments. So I'm going to demonstrate bad technique, and then I'm going to show a good fix for that, which is just have a box or a chair to sit down to. This is also a good fix if your depth isn't far enough. You can actually use a box to really help yourself get used to sitting back on your heels and getting those hips back and down. So it's good correction for both. So as we talked about earlier, as far as points of performance go, the four things that we talked about earlier, one of the things that we want to see is the chest being up in a squat. You definitely want to practice that with an air squat because there's no loading other than your own body weight. Can you get away with the chest caving forward in an air squat? Absolutely, without any danger to you. But if you start to add load on your shoulders like a back squat, or you add load in front like a front squat, or overhead, what you're gonna find is that tacoing over, that chest coming forward, puts you at risk to injury. So you really wanna work on it with just your body weight, just that way, because if you can hold your body weight up, then you can start add load a little bit later, whether it's a kettlebell for goblet squats or a dumbbell holding it in a front rack position, or just putting a plain barbell on your back. So learn to keep the chest up with just the air squat, and then that way when you add load later, you're in a safe position. So here's a good drill. It's called face the wall squats. So I'm gonna stand facing the wall. I'm gonna have my toes ideally up against the wall, or for some beginners, you wanna have just a couple of inches in between you and your feet. But ideally, I wanna be able to get to full depth, keeping my chest up, having my arms up overhead. You can start with your arms down to begin with, but what I would suggest is to go slow. You're gonna find that you might sit back and you don't have the balance to sit back on your heels. So what I want you to do is go kind of slow, sit to where you start to feel like you're gonna fall backwards, come up off of that sitting back so that you stand up a little bit, reset. It'll help you learn to get a little bit lower, a little bit lower, a little bit lower. You can also use a box like we showed earlier with sitting back. You can use that to practice. Start with a high box, sit to the high box, stand tall. Then you can gradually lower the box, or lower where you sit to get to that full depth. So here's the face the wall squat. Okay guys, another thing that we see typically is just people not getting to full depth. Like I said earlier in the points of performance, we want to have the hip crease get below the knees for full proper depth, getting the hamstrings and the glutes involved. So for some people, it's just it's limited mobility. For others, it's just not really knowing how to do the movement, or being able to sit back onto the heels probably more than they've ever done before in their life. So what we're gonna do here is I'm gonna show you a way to put a target down to help you get to that lower depth. You don't wanna bounce off the target. We use medicine balls here, big Dynamax balls. But you can use a low chair, you can use a step, any of those things, something to give you a target to sit back to. I would suggest using the face the wall squat that we just demonstrated earlier to help you sit back on the heels before trying to get to full depth. Also sit back to a box and gradually lower those things as well. But I'm going to show you how to just use a target to help you get lower. Okay. All right, guys, those are the points of performance and some quick drills to help you get better at one of the things that we do quite often throughout our daily lives: sitting back and standing up. Just a straight air squat. Talk about one of the more functional movements. The air squat or the squat is one of the things that we do constantly every day. So getting better at it makes our lives a little bit easier. Just a final point here on that last drill that I showed with the ball. Make sure you're sitting back onto the ball but lightly touching it. Try not to bounce off the ball. Just have the control to sit and just slightly touch the ball, and then stand all the way tall. All right, so that's the squat. See you next month.